Prospero in The Tempest, Ebenezer Scrooge, captain of the spaceship Enterprise, now a gay interior decorator and a New York dance instructor. We never know how this amazing actor is going to surface. He is very versatile. He is very talented. We know that he'll always turn in a first-rate performance. Patrick Stewart. Patrick, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Roger. Born
in England, about 2 months after me, or right around that time, so I think we're about the same age. But
good
you
year.
look a lot better. It was a good year. It was a very good year. When did you start acting in the United States?
I first came here as an actor in 1968 with the Royal Shakespeare Company. And those were all of my acting experiences here, coming as part of a unit company.
Right.
We went to Los Angeles and played the Armanson Theatre with As You Like It, and I think The Taming of the Shrew. And there were subsequent visits over the years. I was here in New York for the first time with the now famous production of Midsummer Night's Dream, which Peter Brook had done. We played at the then Billy Rose and at BAM for a few weeks.
Now, when you were 14, you must not have sounded like this. You must have sounded like every other kid. Tell me how you sounded when you were a kid. What did you talk like?
I talked somewhat like this. If that asked me this question, this is what they'd have heard back, because I didn't just talk with an accent, I spoke dialect-like, so I had to learn a different kind of language altogether.
Wow, that's amazing. I love it's so amazing.
I haven't done that for quite a while.
You haven't done it. You got into it pretty quickly.
Yeah, well, one of the most sensible things I've ever done was to buy a house about 2 years ago back in my home county in England. I don't get there very often, just a few weeks a year, but that is how they talk there, and I came from there yesterday morning, so it's still
so
hot
you
in
still
my
hear
ears.
it.
Yeah.
Can you? Let me ask you this first. Did you do that for other reasons? In other words, to connect yourself back with your roots and remind yourself who you are and where you came from, or not?
I think that must have been part of it. It was one hot, steamy, smoggy afternoon in Los Angeles, and for some reason I was going downtown on the freeway, and the traffic was bad, and it was as though I drove into the idea, you know, like it came like one of those clouds from Star Trek: The Next Generation. It came over my car, and once it had passed through me, I was left with the notion, I will go back and find a house in Yorkshire, in England.
Wow.
Not in the industrial area where I was brought up, but in the Dales up in the north.
Do they know you there? Do they know you as a star, and so therefore they don't let you get down to the corner grocery or without signing autographs? Or?
They know me, but it's in the nature of those people not to acknowledge it. They are very, very cool about it all, and little impressed with anything, except perhaps, you know, how the sheep shearing has gone this year.
It's good, though, to get back in touch. It really is.
It is. I say it was the wisest thing I've ever done. It removes me from all of this for a period of time in a healthier way than anything I've ever known.
What is the downside of stardom? You worked as you are known in the business as really a fine actor. You did so many Shakespearean roles for so many years, and then you know you got into the Star Trek thing, which is a big commercial success. I mean, anybody who would say you wouldn't get into that, I mean, for the dough is crazy. I think it's a good way to make a living.
It
right?
was a significant part of the attraction of the show.
That's a nice way of putting it. I would say, you know, I always wonder about these people who go to these conventions and wander around and make it their life. But I guess some people collect stamps. Some people, it's a hobby.
Yeah, that's right.
It's become a hobby to them. But at what point in your life did you say, you know, I like being a good actor, even a great actor, but I'd like to be a rich actor?
Well, all actors fantasize about that. Not too much, because it will lead to disappointment. I think certainly in England, fewer than 10% of the acting profession are employed at any one time, and those who work regularly represent an even smaller percentage. So my son is in the business. He became an actor about 2.5 years ago, and it's tough advising someone you love so much about this business, because the odds are he may not work hardly at all.
In fact, Actors Equity here in New York, I read an article last week where I don't know how many people, several 100,000 people belong, but only less than 5% made over $30,000 a year.
That's right. Now, you know, if those figures were represented in larger professions or bigger industries, it would be calamitous for the nation, But because we are, in fact, a relatively small group, it goes unnoticed.
It's the reverse with lawyers. They should only 5% of them should be able to make a living, and unfortunately, 99% of them are very rich because they're able to drag out the court proceedings.
No, I have good lawyers who work with me, so I will pass over that remark with a certain amount of discretion.
I don't blame you, but see, I have no fear of ever getting a lawyer if I do something wrong, because they'll take anybody. As we've witnessed recently, they'll take any case. So I'm perfectly safe in saying this. I am certain that Johnny Cochran or one of these guys would show up to defend me no matter what.
I hope it'll never be necessary.
I hope it does not come to that, although there have been times that I've thought it might. Not that kind of a thing, but just that you always think if you need a lawyer, and in show business you do, I guess, because people can sue you for the most bizarre things if you're famous. They can sue you for anything.
You're somewhat vulnerable. You were starting to ask me about the downside of it, in fact, and that perhaps is one aspect of that. Arriving for a World Cup match at the Rose Bowl last year to see the America-Colombia match. I'm a soccer fan. I wasn't really paying attention. Actually, the match had started and I was looking for a space, and I just nudged the car in front of me, the gentlest of tap.
Whiplash.
Well, there you are.
Out lying in the street. Yes.
Could have led to horrible consequences. In fact, it led to happy consequences. America beat Colombia 2-1, I think.
Is that right?
The certain lack of privacy, yes, is important. Certain things you can no longer do alone.
Right.
But the benefits quite overwhelm the downside of all of this, and the benefits are considerable. And it's not just financial, because certainly that has made a difference to me. It's provided me with a measure of security, more than security, than I never expected to have. I didn't become an actor to make money. I loved what I did, and for 28 years, I think I had the best career in the world, because I was able to get a great grounding in provincial rep. I was doing sometimes between...
What do you make when you're doing that kind of thing? I mean, do you make a living? Or?
No. My first job when I left drama school paid me £6.50, which is, $10 a week. And for that I was an acting ASM, which meant that I was first in the morning, put the coffee on, swept the stage, played roles in the evening as well. But I look back on that period of time as an acting ASM, and there have been few times when I've been happier than that. I was totally fulfilled. Then I was able to leave the stage management behind and act. But the significant moment came when I joined the Royal Shakespeare Company in 1966. I'd always wanted to be there. And once I was there, I didn't see any reason to move, not for a long time. I was doing great drama every night. I was doing great modern drama as well. We were making movies,
Well, I don't know. She was walking. She looked great.
Oh, please, she's had work done. Can I do this? Or do I look like some sort of gay superhero?
That is great. I'm not used to seeing you do comedy, but I mean, she said work done was such... That line was done so well. It was thrown away so beautifully that there was a beat, and I thought, God, that's funny if that's what...
It is the script of Jeffrey is quite brilliant. Paul Rudnick, who adapted it from his own stage play, has done a wonderful job. It is one of the most wittily articulate scripts that I've ever been in. But it's true about comedy, and yet throughout my career there have been periods when I have been somewhat bracketed, but I've never stayed there for long. And there was a time with the Royal Shakespeare Company, as my friend Jonathan Frakes on The Next Generation loves to hear me say, I was first choice low comic.
Really?
Oh yeah, I played Grumio, Touchstone, Launce, many of the Shakespearean Stefano, many of the Shakespearean knockabout low comic characters.
Wow.
You wouldn't believe it to look at me now.
No, you wouldn't. I mean, do you long to play a part that you haven't never played, or that you're afraid people won't ask you to do, or you might do someday?
There are all kinds of parts that I want to do that fall into different categories. I would hope that sometime in the next 2 or 3 years I will get to play King Lear.
Right.
I have a theory that...
You've never played Lear?
No. I'm a little young for it. He's 70 years, I think he describes his age as, which I would make 70. But I have a theory
makeup
that... Well, a little gray,
I could play Lear, but I don't have the voice. But I mean, otherwise I could play Lear.
I would rather you didn't, because you may queer the pitch for me if you do. And I would like to,
I think you're safe.
I'd like to have no competition.
I think you're safe. Go ahead.
But I believe that with those great roles, certainly the older great classic roles, it's good if you can play them when you're a little too young, but when you have all of the energy for them, and then return to them again when perhaps you're almost the right age. Falstaff is another role that I'd like to play, for example. So I think Falstaff is the middle-aged actor's Hamlet. It is as complex and as fascinating a role. There are some roles in some modern plays that I would like to do as well, things I suppose I really can't talk about, but I hope within the next year or so some of them might even be seen here in New York.
What if somebody said you'd make a great New York cop who came here from England? I mean, would you play a series? Would you do a series here like that?
Well, I spent 7 years doing Next Generation, and I regret not a moment of it. It was in every sense a fantastic experience.
That's it. That's good to hear you say that. I talked to so many actors who, after 2 years on a series, I'm so tired. I hate this.
Well, I will admit that towards the end, I was becoming restless. I was looking forward to moving on to something else. The time of it all was perfect for me, but the standard of the work was consistently high, and the scripts were consistently good.
Right.
So my interest was always kept up. But that was 7 years out of my life, and you know, I have reached that point now when I can say there are probably fewer years ahead than there are behind, and there's a lot of work to do, and I'm not sure that I can afford the time to focus on just one thing for so long, because series TV is the most demanding work of all. It eats up 10 months or so of each year, and there's little else you can do.
If you were a casting director and you walked in to a casting session, how would you see this person, Patrick Stewart? What would you look at or for, or what would catch your attention?
Well, I suppose the line I cut in the air. I have a somewhat uncompromising, outline as far as my head is concerned.
Yes.
And that's why sometimes in certain roles I like to wear hair. In the movie where I play the dance instructor, I have a hairpiece because I wanted to soften that outline just a little bit, and that's something that hair can do. But a few years ago, you never quite know how people see you. A few years ago, I went up for a role in a miniseries which I badly wanted, and I gave a very good reading, I felt, for this role, and the next morning my agent called me and he said, "Patrick, you blew them away. They were overwhelmed by your reading. They were just stunned by it. They've offered the role to somebody else." And I said,
Sounds like an agent.
well, my agent is an absolutely wonderful and remarkable and trustworthy man. And I said, "Why? Explain this to me." He said, "Well, they thought you were too clean."
Too clean.
Yeah.
That's amazing. You should have gone in with half a beard. You'd have probably got a scruffy look.
The character was a little bit kind of rough and down, and I'd gone in looking like this, a little bit too scrubbed and shining, I suppose. But there you are. I could have looked dirty, and I would probably have been cheap then too.
Yes.
as well as dirty.
We were talking about acting. When you got in, you've got 2 films out. Jeffrey is
Jeffrey just released in San Francisco, Los Angeles, and New York, and to be nationwide, I think, on the 18th.
18th. And that's where you play the gay interior decorator that we just saw on the screen. In doing that, did you have to do anything to prepare for that role? In other words, and let me try to explain this. There's a difference between acting and doing a caricature of a gay person. I mean, if you watch Saturday Night Live, you'll see them do a caricature, a quick caricature, as opposed to getting into the character.
And that was my greatest fear with that role.
That's what I would think. It would be very tough to do that.
Well,
right. We've got 30 seconds to a break, and we'll pick it up after the break. But tell me what you had. Tell me what you had.
Well, he's a very flamboyant character,
right?
Very exotic, and it would have been easy to fall into a stereotyped interpretation of him. That's not what I wanted to do.
Right. Well, it appears as if you got around it, because that laugh came out of me. And I don't. When people are doing caricatures, I expect everything. You did something very unexpected. Actor Patrick Stewart, actor extraordinaire, actually, right after this. Stay with us.
Relationship. And all this sex thing will simply fall into place.
Exactly. I mean, look at us. And look at how happy we are. Don't we make you want to fall in love?
Sometimes I think we should be on a brochure for Middle America. Then everyone can say, oh, look, a wholesome gay couple.
Well, you studied a friend to get some of this, you said?
Oh, yes, I have a friend in England I've known for many, many years. Very elegant, poised, urbane, witty man. And when the movie opens in England, if it does, and I hope that it does, he may well come knocking on my door.
How are actors viewed in society? And by that I mean, you have to fill out these forms when you go places, and they say, "What is your profession?"
I know.
And some people say, "You put actor." What do people think?
In the last few years, I've also become a director. In fact, since I came to America, I now belong to 5 different entertainment guilds, and occasionally now I write director instead of
just
actor.
to avoid why?
Because I've always somehow felt, and I've never said this before, and I may live to regret it.
No, please.
But I've always felt a slight sense of shame whenever I wrote actor, like it was not a real job, a real job.
Isn't that, yeah.
And the public's image of what an actor is was something that I wasn't sure I felt I wanted to be. Now, I love my job, and I'm very proud of what I do. And not only that, I enjoy the company of other actors so much. I feel it's been one of the great bonuses of my life to have spent so much of my time in the company of actors. Yeah. But it does feel slightly odd. So, okay.
So writing actor, now, is it because you're slightly ashamed about that, or you think they're going to think I don't have a job? They're going to think I don't.
That's right. It's a euphemism for being unemployed.
Yeah, it's become to a lot of people. They say, well, this guy can't be working.
I know, yes. And a lot of people are not, and as we said earlier, that's very tough.
A very... but there are many people in that profession who go in, as in many professions, that probably shouldn't be in it. I mean, it's hard to, it'd be terrible if you had the calling and not the talent. I would think that would be very tough.
I've known that, and it makes for very unhappy people.
That's got to be sad. It's the only profession I know where you are the tool. A doctor can use instruments, a chef can use things, but you're the tool. How does that make you live differently? Does it?
Well, sometimes very carefully. On Sunday night, I did a solo benefit performance in Stratford-on-Avon in the Swan Theatre. A very important occasion for me because I was going back to the RSC for the first time in about 14 years. And so for the 48 hours before that, I was hyper-conscious about my breathing, my throat, if I was getting enough rest, because finally, when it came to 7:30, all I had to take on stage that night was this body. And during the time I was doing Christmas Carol here in New York, the same thing. I was, and singers have this too, of course.
Yeah, when you're playing a lot of parts too, if your voice goes, if the air conditioning gets to your voice, or it's over.
There's nowhere to go. Nowhere to go. I'm not a mime.
Yes.
I couldn't create it that way. So that creates, for me at any rate, a constant level of anxiety about being healthy and strong and ready to work.
To play Shakespeare, does it require different tools than if, let's say I loved Shakespeare, I read a lot of I decided I wanted to be a Shakespearean actor. What would I have to do? I mean, that voice, that sound, that there's a sense of that.
Yes, it's very exposing. You would have to acquire a technique, and for that it would mean strength and stamina. It would mean a good, strong voice that can sustain a long verse line, for instance. It needs, Olivier always used to say that a classical actor needs to have the physique of an athlete, because those big roles are physically exhausting. And then skills which actually can be acquired quite easily of how to take that language. And I think you have a clip from The Tempest, which I did in the park earlier.
Oh, do we have that clip? If we have it, let's roll it. Tell them to roll it. Let's look at it, then we'll talk about it.
To communicate.
And by my prescience I find my zenith doth depend upon a most auspicious star, whose influence, if I court not but omit, my fortunes will ever after droop.
Here, cease all questions.
Thou art inclined to sleep. 'Tis a good dullness. Give it way. I know thou canst not choose.
There's physical, I saw the physical movement there you were talking
Yeah,
about.
well, George Wolfe in the Public Theatre gave us a huge sandpit, like a bull ring, to act in, and we had to fill that space. Taking those texts, 400 years old, some of them a little obscure, some of them a little complex, words that we don't use anymore today, and communicating them to a late 20th century audience. Not just the meaning, but also the emotional content of them too. And for that, it needs a little bit of study, a little bit of understanding of how those texts work. But that can be learned.
The other thing that occurred to me was the breath control. I mean, being able to sustain a line, you said a verse, but iambic pentameter is not the easiest sometimes. Well, it's got a rhythm, but it is, you have to sustain, the vowel sounds have to be sustained.
It can be, a teacher of mine used to describe it like surfing. It can be like a wave. The verse can actually keep propelling you all the time forward. And if you pay attention to the structure of the verse, you can even find where Shakespeare is suggesting that you breathe. Really? It's almost as though there are signposts hidden in the language that are there to help the actor deliver the performance technically. So yes, it's you've just got to basically you've got to be strong to do it. I think.
Yeah. That's interesting about the whole profession of acting. People think it must be easy. You go in, work a couple hours, go home. It's a very physically, even when you wait, it's physically exhausting in a film.
Monday morning, when after I'd done this one night, this solo show, which was a 2-hour show at Stratford, I woke up in the morning and I felt as though I'd been knocked over by a truck and run over. My body ached physically because of the stress and strain of doing it. But oh gosh, I hate whining. The exhilaration, the benefits of that, the thrill of standing on that stage in that theater in front of those people, doing some wonderful text, more than compensates for a few aches and pains.
Now that you've got a few bucks and you're comfortable, you're in demand as an actor. Occasionally you're a little too clean to be hired, but other than that, you work whenever you want. What do you want to do? I mean, can you pick and choose? What are you going to do next?
Yeah, it's probably that position that all actors long to be at. I do now have a certain amount of leisure. It's just the security that money gives you to not have to take every job. And I know what it's like to take every job. You look at a job and you say, that's repairing the living room window. You look at a job and you say, that's the bathroom. And I've done that all my life, literally attached tags to pieces of work, especially pieces of work I didn't want to do. So now I can do only what interests me. And my agent in London, I'm surrounded by some really classy, quality people, said to me the other day when I was passing on a script, if it doesn't make your blood race, Patrick, you don't have to do it. And I think she touched on something that's very important now. If it stirs me,
do the things
if
that
it
you
fires
really
me, like Jeffrey. I read Jeffrey and I laughed all the way through the script and I ended the script weeping. and that's why I've said I felt as though I had no choice but to do it because it moved me so strongly. I want others to be moved by it in the same way. So there are just so many things to do, Roger. I sometimes panic in bed at night, worrying about the things there are to do and the little amount of time to do them in.
Yeah. Well, I think you're on the right track, though. If it isn't quality, if it isn't something you really believe in, don't do it. But fortunately, you're in the place so you can do that.
Yeah, you can't affect others, you see, it seems to me.
Yeah.
You can do something you don't really believe in. It's never going to be as potent as if you can put your whole spirit behind it.
Patrick, it was a real pleasure.
For me, too.
Okay. Thank you very much. Coming up in just a moment, a fascinating segment. You will be glued to the set. Stay with us.